So today we're going to talk about absolute value again, and we talked about absolute value at the beginning of the year, so this is just a little bit of a review. So the absolute value of a number is its distance from 0, and we're talking about on a number line. So if we have this number line here, we're talking about the distance a number is from 0, or the number of spaces it is from 0. We can write absolute value with the absolute value bars and a number in the middle. So if we said the absolute value of 7, we would write it like this. So let's look down here. How far is negative 3 from 0? So here's 0, and here's negative 3. How far is negative 3 from 0? How many spaces? 1, 2, 3. So it's 3 units away. The absolute value of negative 3 would be 3. Now for this one, we have how far is negative 2 from 0? Here's 0, and here's negative 2. How many units or spaces is negative 2 from 0? How far away is negative 2 from 0? So we count 1, 2, it is 2 units away. So down in this box it says if there is an operation within the absolute value bar, perform the operation, use PEMDAS if necessary, and then take the absolute value. So right here we have the absolute value of 9 plus 10. We need to perform the operation that's inside of our absolute value bars before we can solve. So we need to solve 9 plus 10. 9 plus 10 is 19. That 19 is in our absolute value bars. So now we need to solve the absolute value of 19. And the absolute value of 19 is the distance 19 is from 0. So how many spaces is 19 from 0? And that would be 19. Remember, absolute value is neither positive or negative. It's the distance it is from 0. Okay, so let's look at the next page. So we have some problems. We need to take the absolute value of negative 34. Think about if we have our number line, and this is 0, and over here is negative 34. We need to figure out how many spaces are in between, how many of these are in between 34 and 0. Well, let's think about the number 34. It's 34 spaces away, so the absolute value of negative 34 is just 34. Now we have the absolute value of 12. How far is 12 away from 0? It is 12 spaces away. Now here we have this problem. We have the absolute value of 19 plus 12. So we need to solve what's inside of our absolute value bars and then take the absolute value. So we need to solve 19 plus 12, and we'll get the absolute value of 31. And now we are able to take that absolute value. So the absolute value of 31 is the distance 31 is from 0, and that is just 31. Okay, now we have the absolute value of negative 8 plus 3. The first thing we need to do is take the absolute value following the order of operations. So the absolute value is first. The absolute value of negative 8 is the distance negative 8 is from 0, which is 8 plus 3. I want you to solve 8 plus 3. Hit play when you're ready. Pause the video. Okay, 8 plus 3 is 11, and your answer is 11. Okay, number 5, we have negative absolute value of negative 19. So we need to do order of operations first. So our grouping is negative 19 in the absolute value. We have to take that absolute value first. So the absolute value of negative 19 is 19. And we can't just get rid of this negative sign here. We need to bring it down. So we now have negative 19 as our answer. And this last one, I want you to go ahead and solve this problem. Hit play when you are finished. Pause the video. Okay, we need to take the absolute value of negative 0.245, and that is the distance 0.245 is from 0. So the absolute value is 0.245. Okay, we are now turning our page and we're going to talk about fractions, decimals, and percents and how we change them back and forth. So the first thing we do when we're converting fractions to decimals is if the number is a mixed number, use the whole number. Of the mixed number as the whole number in your decimal. And that's just saying that this 2 is our whole number in our whole mixed number. So this big number is 2/4 is our mixed number. The whole number is that 2. And that's saying when we make this a decimal, that 2 is going to go in that first spot and then the decimal. Next we'll solve for the fraction of what it would be in our decimal. So the second step for the fraction is use long division to divide the numerator by the denominator. So we're going to do our top part of our fraction, which is the numerator, divided by our bottom part of the fraction, which is the denominator. So remember we used that whole number and we got 2 point something. And now we need to divide. So we have 1/4 and we need to long divide. So we have 4 on the outside and our numerator on the inside. 4 can't go into 1, so we need to add a decimal. And then we could make it a 0. How many times can 4 go into 10? Well, we can think 4 times 2 is 8. Subtract 10 minus 8 is 2. Add in a 0 and bring it down because we're not to 0 yet. How many times can 4 go into 20? That's 5. 20 minus 20 is 0. So our decimal is 0.25. Now, our decimal is not just 0.25 though. We still have this whole number floating right here. So we would have to add that 25 to our number. So our whole number, or all of our number in decimal form, would be 2.25. So here's some examples. Remember it says if the number is a mixed number, use that whole number, this number, as the first number in your fraction, your first whole number. So we're going to have 1 point something. Now we need to long divide the numerator by the denominator. So we need to do 3 divided by 4. Or you can also think about quarters. How many quarters we have, like how many quarters go into $1, how many cents we have for 3 out of 4. We have 75. But you can also do it as long division. So we would do 4 divided by 3. 4 can't go into 3, so we need to make it a decimal. Add in our 0. How many times can 4 go into 30? So 4 times 7 is going to go into 30s. So we're going to have 4 times 28. Subtract. We need to borrow. So 10 minus 8 is 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. And we're not done. We have no 0 here yet. So we're going to add a 0 and bring it down. We'll have a 0. How many times can 4 go into 20? Well, 4 times 5 is 20. So we'll have 20 minus 20, and you get 0. So our decimal is 0.75. Remember, we need to add that on to the 1 point and make it 0.75. And that is converting fractions to decimals for number 1. Now let's look at number 2. We have a whole number, so we're going to bring it down and write our decimal. But we need to figure out our fraction, and how we're going to do that is to long divide. So we have 8 divided by 2. 8 can't go into 2, so we know we're going to have a decimal. How many times can 8 go into 20? Well, 8 times 2 is 16. We're going to subtract 4. 1 minus 1 is 0. And now we're not at 0 yet, so we need to add a 0 and bring it down. We get 40. 8 times 5 gets you to 40. And we'll subtract and get 0. So our decimal is 0.25. We need to add that to that 3, so we have 3.25. and that is our fraction to decimal for number 2. Okay, so now we're converting the following fractions into decimals. So we need to do 1 over 5 into a decimal. Well, we need a long divide. So our numerator goes underneath, denominator's on the outside. 5 can't go into 1, so we need to have a decimal. We'll add in a 0. 5 times 2 gets you to 10, so 10 minus 10 is 0, and our decimal is just 0.20. Now let's do number 3. We need to long divide if we don't know. So we're going to have 3 divided by 20. 20 can't go into 3, so we're going to have a decimal. Add in your 0. 20, how many times can 20 go into 30? 1 time. So we have 20. Subtract 0 minus 0 is 0. 3 minus 2 is 1, so we have 10. 20 can't go into 10 though, so we need to add another 0 and bring it down. So we have 100. What times 20 can get us to 100? Well, 5 times 20 gets you to 100. So 100 minus 100 is 0. Our decimal is 0.15. Okay, I want you to go ahead and do number 5 and 6 on your own. Please make sure that you look at your whole numbers and what you would do with those in your decimal, and then long divide. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so let's look at number 5. We have a whole number, so we can bring that down. We know it's going to be the whole number in our decimal. And now we have 1/2. You could know that 1/2 is just 0.5, or you could also long divide it. So 2 can't go into 1, so we make it a decimal. So it's now 10. You go in 5 times. 10 minus 10 is 0. So we got 0.5. 7.5 because we have that whole number. Number 6, we have a whole number, so we're going to bring that down, put it in our decimal. Now solve for the fraction. So 1 divided by 8. 8 can't go into 1, so we need a decimal. 8 can go into 10 2 times, so we have 10 minus 8. We get 2. We're not done yet, so we're going to have a 0 and bring it down. 8 can go into 20 2 times. Oh wait, hang on. Let's erase real quick. Sorry about that. So we are doing 1 divided by 8. 8 can go into 1, can't go into 1, so we're having a decimal. We have 10, it can go in 1 time, so we get 8 minus, we'll get 2, bring down the 0, so we'll have 20, 8 can go into 22 times, we'll get 16, so 8 times 2 is 16, subtract. Okay, we have 4, so we're going to need to add a 0 and bring it down. We'll have 40, 8 times 5 gets us to 40. So 40 minus 40 gets us to 0, and our decimal is 5.125. We are just bringing this over here. Okay, the next part of our notes is converting decimals into percents. So first we find the decimal point. So we need to just find the decimal point in a number. So the number 9, the decimal, if we can't see it, is at the end of the number. So that would be the decimal point. Here we have a decimal, and there we have a decimal. Now we need to move the decimal 2 places to the right. And that's just like saying we're multiplying by 100. So anytime you have a decimal, you need to multiply it by 100 or move it 2 loops to the right so that you make it into a percentage. So if we have 9, we're going to move it 2 loops to the right, 1, 2, fill in our zeros, and our percent is going to be 900%. If we have 13.5, we need to make it into a percentage, so we're going to move it 2 loops to the right, fill in your zeros. Our percentage is going to be 1,350%. And our last one. This one is a repeating decimal, and that means this is 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and so on. So if we move it 2 spaces to the right, our percentage would be 33.3 repeating percent. Okay, so now we have to do some work. So we have 0.2 and we need to make it a percent. Remember, we need to draw 2 loops, and this is saying like times 100. So you're multiplying a number by 100. So we're going to do 2 loops, 1, 2, fill in our zeros. We can lose anything that of the zeros in front, so we will have 20%. For number 2, we need to move it 2 to the right, 1, 2. So our new number is 428.28%. Now I want you to do 3 and 4 on your own. Make sure you are moving it 2 loops to the right, and go ahead and hit play when you're ready to check your answers. Please pause the video. Okay, so number 3, we need to move it to the right, 1, 2. So our new number is 75%. We have number 4, we're moving it 2 to the right. And remember, this is a repeating decimal, so that's like saying 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, and so on. That's going on and on and on and on. So our percentage is 66.6 repeating percent. Okie dokie. So now we are going to do this section, and it says choose the greatest number in each set. Remember to change everything to a decimal. So we're going to change all these numbers to a decimal. So we have 2 over 5, and we need to make that into a decimal. And the way we do that is long division, if you don't know. So we have 5 divided by 2. 5 can't go into 2, so we're going to have a decimal. 5 can go into 20 though. 5 times 4 gets us to 20. So our decimal for 2 over 5 is 0.4. That's a decimal, so we're good. And then we have 3 divided by 8. So can 8 go into 3? No, so we're going to have a decimal. So what times 8 can get us to 30? So 8 times 4 is 32, so that's not going to work. So 8 times 3 is 24. Subtract. Get 6. So we're not there yet. Add a 0, bring it down. So we'll have 60. 8 times 7 gets us to 56. We'll have to add a 0, bring it down. And then we have 8 times what gets us to 40? 8 times 5. So this would be 0.375 as our decimal. Okay, so we have all these numbers in decimal form now, and we need to choose the greatest number in each set. So we're going to look at the first number after the decimal. Whichever number is the biggest is going to be one of the biggest numbers. So we have a 4, a 4, a 3, and a 3. 3 is smaller than 4, so these two are out. Now we have 4 and nothing here, and a 4 and a 5. So 5 would be bigger than 0, so this number would be our biggest number, or our greatest number in each set. So what I want you to do is number 6. I want you to convert each number to a decimal, and then circle your biggest number. Hit play when you're ready to check your answer. Please pause the video. Okay, so we are going to check our answer, and first we need to convert 3/4 into a decimal, and we know 3 goes into, oopsies. Okay, 4 can't go into 3. 4 can go into 30, 28 times. Okay, 4 times something gets us to 20. 4 times 5. We have 0.75. decimal, decimal, and we need to make this into a decimal. So 5 divided by 4. 5 can't go into 4, so it's going to be a decimal. 5 can go into 40 though, 8 times, so our decimal is 0.8. Again, we're looking at the decimal, the number right after the decimal. So we have a 7, a 0, a 7, and an 8. Well, we know 0 is not going to work because that's too small. So we have a 7, and an 8. Well, 8 is the biggest number, so that means 4 over 5 will be the biggest number, and that should have been the number you circled. Okay, so at this point, you are going to go into your Socrative in Google Classroom, and then I will be conferencing with you.